Well, hello, everybody. Grace and peace to you in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. My name is Jim McCormick. I am the Vice President for Student Life and Enrollment here at CCU, and it is a great honor to be with you tonight on our first round of Weekend of Welcome seminars. Usually, I would have done this on campus with you on that Thursday of orientation. Sorry I can't be with you this year, but we're doing the best we can to provide you the information that we want to provide you in this format. Well, 2 weeks from now, we'll have had our first day of classes, and we'll be doing the afterglow on that to see how everything went. We're excited to get school back. It just seemed like it's been a long time since last March, since we were together. And so very much interested in getting students back, and especially for new students, to welcome them into our community and to get moving on with this year. Well, tonight I have a few things that I want to say about what your student might go through in their first year here at CCU. And for some of you who already have students in college, you may resonate with some of this as I bring it out. This is my 37th year in higher education at 4 different colleges. And as I've watched the comings and goings, just some tips that I want to bring out to parents as they send their student off to college here at CCU. Let me start with prayer. Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, to fellowship together, to bring out some of the truths of what happens when students go to college, and hopefully give some of these parents some tips about what to do with some of the things that might happen. Lord, I ask that you be honored tonight, that you would use this to comfort these parents in sending their student to CCU. And Lord, that you would be with all of us as we gear up for just really less than 2 weeks for new students coming on campus. As we gear up for that you would just be with us and present. And Lord, that you would guide and direct us through this. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, dear mother and dad, I know that since I left for college, I've been remiss in writing, and I am sorry for my thoughtlessness and not having written before. I now will bring you up to date on some of the things that have been happening in my life. As you will see, it has been a wondrous but stressful time. Well, I'm getting along pretty well now. The skull fracture and the concussion that I received when I jumped out of the window of my dorm when it caught on fire shortly after my arrival here is pretty well healed now. I only spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and now I can see almost normally, getting those sick headaches only once a day now. Fortunately, the fire in the dorm and my jump was witnessed by an attendant at the gas station across the street. He was the one who called 911. He saved my life. He also visited me every day in the hospital, and since I had nowhere to go after the fire, he invited me to move into the basement of his house. There are about 10 guys upstairs, but so far I've been able to have my own space, although there's only one bathroom. Anyway, he's a very fine boy, and I have fallen deeply in love with him. We are planning to get married after this next tour. Oh yeah, I forgot, his dream in life is to be able to follow the band Fish around on every tour they do. I plan to take next semester off and travel with him around the nation. It'll be kind of like camping again, Dad, just like we did when I was small, except we'll be sleeping outside with no tent and living off the land. Not much money to go around for the trip right now, but I plan to fix that after I sell my car. That will also help finance our marriage, which I hope to happen in a field on the first leg of the tour. We are hoping for a honeymoon baby. Now that I have brought you up to date, I want to tell you that there was no dorm fire. I did not have a concussion or a skull fracture. I did not have to be in the hospital. I am not engaged, and there is no guy. However, I'm getting a D in American history and an F in chemistry, and I want you to see those grades in their proper perspective. Your loving daughter, Sharon. Proper perspective is what Sharon had, and some of the things that I want to talk about tonight quickly is just perspective, connection, and communication. I just want to give you a few words. When you think about sending your student to our campus and they start their career with us, their experience with us, I just want to go over some things that I've seen over my years in student life and 25 years here at CCU. There are some natural struggles that go through, that students go through in the first couple weeks. It's a new environment. There are new things to figure out. There are new schedules to be on. There are new people to meet. There are lots of new things coming into a student's life. And for some of them, if there have been old struggles going on in high school, struggles personally, some with behavior or with academics, a lot of times we think that a new environment will kind of wipe away all that. It'll be a clean slate. They won't struggle with that again just because they're in a new environment at CCU. And I just encourage you that if that is your son or daughter, there's some things in their past that haven't been completely dealt with, or maybe haven't surfaced even for a while, that don't depend on a new environment at CCU to kind of wipe away those things. Let's get on those quickly. Let's get them into counseling quickly. Let's get them with their Life Direction Center advisor for an academic journey walkthrough quickly. Let's do some things there that really set them up for success. Many times I'll get a call from a parent, or I'll call a parent in October or November, and one of the things they'll say is, well, we wondered when this was going to pop up again. And I'm just thinking, let's get in front of that early. I think sometimes students and parents don't do that because they think they'll be flagged or something like that. But on the contrary, I think it's smart to move forward with the resources that we have early so that we can kind of stave off anything that has been happening in the past. You know that roommates are one of the biggest transition issues for students coming in, especially their freshman year. For many of your sons and daughters, they've never had a roommate, and now they're asked to live with someone. And I just ask you to think about keeping their roommates in prayer, to begin praying for their roommates. One of the things that was interesting with my wife in college, I would sometimes walk in to where she lived, and one of her roommates would be on the phone, and 5 or 10 minutes later say, "Hey, Lori, it's your parents." Every time her parents called, they included their roommates. They asked about their roommates. If they were in town taking Lori out to dinner, the roommates were always invited for Thanksgiving, always invited for Christmas. In so many ways, how the roommate situation goes, so will their fall semester and ultimately their freshman year here at CCU. The roommates are a big deal. Remember that they spend 4 hours outside the classroom for every hour they're in the classroom, and a lot of it is in their apartments with their roommates. So pray for them. Be very aware of what's going on with those roommates, and hope that those roommates will really come together. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. Remember that these first few weeks at CCU, we keep these guys running and gunning pretty well. Lots of activities and things that are going on campus. Their schedules are all thrown into the wind because they just haven't had to live in a situation where 300 people are kind of buzzing around till late at night. So it's very kind of common for them to kind of come across sick and tired. If they're homesick a little bit, they're just run down. And getting into a routine is really key for college students. You may have kind of figured this out as you've parented your student, but they love routine. They really do. They won't tell you they love routine too much sometimes, but they love routine. Once they get into a routine and get moving with classes and kind of the vibrancy of life here at CCU, that makes them feel better, that makes them feel a part, that really makes them move forward. And so pray for that routine will set in very quickly. But before that, you may well hear from them that they're sick and they're tired and they're kind of run down. and that's really to be expected in the first couple weeks. By Labor Day, really, it's our intention that they are in routine, that they have kind of figured things out, and they are really ready to move on with the rest of the semester. And that's why we put the new student retreat there. We're still trying to figure out what to do with the new student retreat this year for our new students. But that's why we put that there, is to kind of settle them down and get back into routine when they come back from that. So more on the new student retreat later as we figure that out. Connection is the word that I would give you today. Perspective and connection. Connection really is this whole idea that your student is beginning to be connected to the university. They're feeling that connection. What you should be hearing after a week or two is that they have connected with some folks, that their classes are going initially okay, that they have found a little bit of a niche or a group going forward. It's really what you're trying to listen for. The research shows that a student who feels connected to their university will, number one, retain at that university, which is good for me, and number two, graduate from that university, which is good for all of us. So connection is really the things that we're trying to do from orientation on, especially with new students. Returning students have already found their connection, many of them. Every year there's new connections to make, and that's what's exciting about college, in my opinion. But for our new students, connection right away is a real key, and that kind of connection is what you're looking for and what you should be hearing. Went out the other night with some guys. We're playing cards. Classes are good. This class looks like a favorite. This class might be a little challenging. I heard a chapel speaker the other day that really got me thinking. Connection is really what you're looking for in especially those first 2 weeks, and then ultimately throughout the semester. Classes right away are interesting. Some will have a couple weeks of classes and say, hey, this is kind of like high school in some ways. I can do this. Some will have the first couple weeks of classes and just be a little freaked out that, man, so much work here. I look at all these syllabi and how am I ever going to get this done? So classes is kind of interesting. For those of you who went to college, you know that a lot of college and college classes is just matching my learning style with the professor's learning style. And the reason that you would hear from some students that, hey, this class, I really love this class, I love the guys teaching, probably because the learning styles are a lot similar to your students and they just connect. I remember when some of the professors I had trouble with, it's because I just couldn't understand where they were coming from because their learning style was so different than mine. And I had to get on that wavelength, I had to get on that frequency. And once I did, I could figure it out. So a lot of it is just that, getting on the same frequency. So you should hear that some of their classes are really good and fun. And you shouldn't be concerned when they say I've got a couple challenging classes, or I'm sure I'm gonna like this class. That's all part of the learning environment, and what's good for them is this whole process of trying to match that up and trying to work through something that doesn't come as easy for them as they hope. You ought to be hearing that they're going to class, obviously, that they're zooming in, and that if they're going to do that, but that classes are starting to move. And one of the things you can have perspective about is that first paper or quiz that a student would have in their classes. Many times it is the gauge that the professor is trying to get of the student. And so it won't be anything for them to get a C on one or a D on one or something like that on one of those first quizzes or papers. And a perspective there is not to, honey, we're paying for this, and we're not going to be able to keep you there if you don't do well in your classes. But really one of, what'd you learn from that? Do you need to talk to the professor about that? Have you talked to others in the class? What did you really learn about that first quiz or that first paper? Many times those are a very low percentage in the overall grade scheme, so it's not that big a deal at all. But the professors are just trying to set the standard there. And then after that, students usually aspire right to where the professor wants them to aspire after that. So perspective there is not so much that you got a D or a C and you've never gotten a C in your life, but that what did you learn from that? And for sure, have you talked to the professor or others in your class about how they perceived that, what they got in that as well. But classes, really should be kind of moving along. I'm in the flow. I'm going, and things are good. This Zoom thing is hard. Maybe if some of you have students who are doing a Zoom from their residence hall room, but I've got the outlets kind of I need on the classes. But you should be hearing about kind of church and their personal relationship with God. You know what? This year is kind of going to be a different year, because usually we really encourage students to go to church. If they live on campus, their resident assistants are really trying to take them to church that first Sunday or so. This year, those RAs will be putting together Zooms of churches and that kind of thing for the students to come together and view on Sunday. Many of our students, excuse me, don't go to church Sunday morning. In fact, many of our upperclassmen serve on Sunday morning in a church, but then they go to church on another night, and now they're all online in different ways. But you should be hearing, hey, I've started to explore a local church. We really push church attendance. We try to get them not to be thinking that chapel is their church. We want them to have a church home and a relationship with the church outside of CCU, and we'll really push that in the first month here. And you should hear that they're having really some eye-opening kind of things with the Lord, that they've seen the Lord's provision, that they've seen the Lord in different ways since they've come to CCU, that they're starting to get a sense of who the Lord is in their life, and even deeper than they've had before, that they've met some folks that have maybe a more vibrant relationship than they did with the Lord, and it's really inspired them and teaching them some things, that they're feeling pushed in that area a little bit. So when you come and are immersed in a community like ours, where I really believe most of our student body is pushing in the same direction in their faith. If they're not used to that, 60% of our students come from public schools. That's a transition in itself, to really be around a group of folks who are committed to the Christian lifestyle is very refreshing or different for them, and it should push them along a little bit in their faith. And I hope you have a conversation like I did with Amanda and Jake, my kids, who both really realized some things about their faith very quickly when they came to CCU, and knew that this was a place where they could really explore and expand who God was in their life. But we're pushing church here, so you should ask about that at some, what churches have you visited online, or most of our churches are in seat as well. You can get a reservation and go. And our resident assistants, if they're on campus, will really be leading them down that path. If your student is coming with and leaving a long distance relationship, leaving a relationship and making it long distance, I guess, I just wanted to say a couple words on that. One of the funniest stories of my parenting is with my daughter Amanda, who was dating a guy in high school, and she knew that my stat was that about 10% of long distance high school relationships will last in the first year of college. And she kept telling me, Dad, he's going to Baylor and I'm coming here, and we're going to prove you wrong. Well, by October, it was done. They're just swimming in two different ponds at that point. There's too much going on, and it does get in the way of connection, especially if your son or daughter is still trying to, leaving weekends or whatever to see their boyfriend or girlfriend. Does get in the way of connection. But I also know that as parents, we have little to say into that. So we can guide and direct as much as possible. But we have little to say really in that relationship. So it's just a matter of prayer about that relationship, and hoping that the Lord will either guide it to fruition or end it quickly so that it doesn't get in the way of this connection piece here on campus. Obviously, the best thing for your son or daughter is to be available on campus for relationships that bloom and blossom all over the place. That flexible and events that popped up spontaneously that they're available for just because they're here. And when they're not here, they miss that side of this community that hurts them in an overall sense of their connection to the university. So if you have a long distance relationship and you're hoping that it would end, know that probably it will. And if you actually like the guy and hope it doesn't, then just prayer for the Lord bringing that to fruition. I know it's about all we can do as parents. The last thing in this segment I wanted to talk about was just coming home. And for many, coming home is happens. Parents will ask me what's too much and what's not enough and that kind of thing. What I tell local parents a lot is if you're sending your student here locally, it seems like those parents tell me they see less of their kid than a parent from Texas does. Because they just kind of, home is just right there and they don't really need to run home kind of thing. But there's really not a formula there of too much or not at all. If you have a son, they'll probably be home less than a daughter. And not at all doesn't mean, they've left the nest and said, I've totally left you in the dust. And too much doesn't necessarily mean things aren't going well here. So it's really a gauge on that. And I want to talk about that, the first vacation here in a minute, and I will. Finances, I wanted to just touch on a second. Students, we know how expensive a Christian university can be for many of you. And we appreciate how you are stewarding that and how we pray all the time that the Lord would bless your finances. But don't underestimate how your student kind of takes that on as well. And I would just talk about a couple things. The last thing my dad said to me when he dropped me off to college my freshman year is don't worry about the finances. We've had that discussion. We've had that talk. You know what your part is. We've asked the Lord to bless the other. You get after what's going to make you successful here. And we've got the finances figured out. So I would just ask if you've had a conversation with your child about the finances. Do they know, for instance, that the job that they have, some of that money has to go toward tuition and living expenses or not? These can be issues later when they spend their first paycheck and you're like, hold on, some of that was supposed to go for tuition. Well, we never talked about that, Dad. Do you have a good face on the finances? Do they know that we're relying on the Lord? Yes, but we have a plan. And one of the things that I would say on that is, a student who has a rough patch in a class, for instance, and they may have a couple of bad grades in that class, can sometimes really get on this kind of treadmill of, my parents are paying for this, it's a stretch for them, I'm not doing well. And sometimes that becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy going forward. They just kind of start circling the drain a little bit and get depressed over that and can't kind of work themselves out of that. So I'd say have a good face on the finances. Talk to your student about the finances, the plan, what that's about, and that the Lord, we're praying on the Lord. Join us, student, to pray that the Lord would really bless our finances going forward. Parents ask me a lot, what about work? And I would say this, depending on your finances, if your student doesn't have to work, especially in the first semester fall, great. I would say don't. It gets in the way of connection when they're putting 10 or 15 hours of work in a week off campus. If they have to work, fine, limit it as much as you can to about 10 hours a week if you could in the fall. Now, as they go, I know juniors and seniors around here who work 20 hours a week, and it's fine. They've got that all set, and it doesn't impact their academics whatsoever. But for a freshman or even a new transfer coming into a new place, that can sometimes drag them down. Now, the one caveat I would have is if they work on campus, then go ahead and get them a job right away if they can work on campus, because that'll just be one more connection piece, another staff that they get connected to, another department that they're working with and meeting people. So that's great. But if they can, save more work, especially for spring. If they're living on campus, they've got hot water and they've got food every day. So many parents ask me about spending limits for their children, and I would just give you this advice. We have plenty of students here who live on $20 a week, and those are students who obviously don't have to drive off campus that much for work, and they're not buying ski passes and that kind of thing, and they're relying on their meal plan and living on campus. And then there's others who need a little more spending money for the week because they are working off campus. They want to be very active, in Colorado, so their gas is something that is a big expense for them as well. So I would just say on the spending limit side, really it's about, we know you're eating and we know you have housing, so what else is there that we really need to talk about for that? And then I'd really make sure you had a conversation with your student on what that spending limits look like. Now, some of these students have been working throughout high school, and many of them have come to depend on a paycheck, especially for some disposable income as well. And so some of you might actually struggle with limiting them because they want to work a bunch of hours so that they have money to do what they want to do. Just talk about being smart there, and as much as possible, maybe saving the bulk of that for spring if you can, or steer them to really try to get a job on campus where even though they're working, they're really connecting with other people on campus as they do that. But have a conversation about the finances. Sometimes parents try to kind of shelter their kids from finances, and I think really opening them up to the premise of how the Lord will supply this and move us forward, and what we're counting on God to do during this time can really be spiritually enriching for them and give them a sense of confidence as they go. Well, as we get into it, the first test or paper we've talked about, what kind of patterns are your student in? What kind of patterns are they starting to display? And a great question if you're a mother of a son, especially, who doesn't appreciate 100 questions all the time, is tell me how Monday looks. What's a Monday look like for you? What do you do on Tuesdays? Open-ended, so that they can say, well, I've got an 8 o'clock and I've got a 9:25, and then there's chapel, and then some, I usually eat with the guys on the floor, for lunch, and then in the afternoon, most days, we play some basketball outdoors if we can, or some spike ball. And then, Tuesday nights, I've got a Bible study, but just try to get a pattern. Really, that connection piece is told through patterns, and open-ended questions about those kind of things. And also, parents, a great thing, if you can do that, is to write that down, stick it on your fridge, and so at 10 o'clock, you could look up there, oh, he's in class right now, asking the Lord to be with him in class, that kind of thing. But what are the patterns that your student is starting to really portray? And they should obviously be very healthy patterns that have a lot of connection pieces to them, and something that you can kind of really hear that connection is starting to be lived out on campus. And obviously there's unhealthy patterns that you're hearing as well. Well, I don't do much. I don't know very many people, so I stay in my apartment a lot, that kind of thing. And I'll talk about what to do about some of those here at the end. But you're looking for patterns of connection. You should be starting after a couple weeks as we get into the semester to get a feel for the roommate situation, how the roommate thing is coming about. Um, and I think sometimes we think that immediate roommate, is going to be in their wedding, and sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. Hopefully, they're connecting with someone in their environment. It could be their direct roommate, but someone in the apartment is great as well. And many times that's who it is. It's an apartment mate rather than the direct roommate. And that's great. And sometimes it's someone across the hall or someone upstairs. But really, the question is, my son, when he first went to college, had a roommate. They didn't do much together, but when I pressed him, he was fine with Jose. Jose was great and fine. We just don't have a lot in common. We don't do all that much together. But the guys across the hall, Michael, he really had some relationships with those guys, and they did a lot together, and that was great. So who in the environment are they really starting to connect with? Now, obviously, when the roommate situation is not good or even okay, then you might really have to start speaking through that a little bit. And what I'd ask you to think about on the roommate situation is to be an advocate for the experience. Living with someone and figuring out things like Christ-like dialogue and conflict resolution, how to really communicate through that well, is a lifelong skill, a skill that they will use in many ways through their work life, through their family life. And so to be an advocate for that is something that is really important. Now you're going to start that by being an advocate for knowing about their roommates, talking to their roommates, sometimes inviting their roommates to you're going to advocate for that experience just by doing those little things. Your student knows, mom and dad are interested in this roommate relationship. Already that advocacy is set. But when things don't go well, to not jump into the deep end of the pool right away. I'm going to call the resident assistant or the school and get this fixed, unless obviously it's very serious. But otherwise, it's just, what have you done, son, in communicating with that? What have you done in praying about that? What have you done in trying to work through that a little bit? We have a whole scenario where the resident assistant can help roommates with a roommate contract and some things and really get that communication going. And many of our students will employ that, going forward. But the importance there of communication is really key. And starting to get a sense of that roommate relationship, what's happening in that apartment, and really what your son or daughter's role is there, that are really teaching them and moving them in good ways is really important. So being an advocate for that experience there is really good. And really noticing that the importance of communication is really key within that roommate environment. Now, as we get into it as well, you might find yourself at some point what I call worried but not able. You're worried about something, with your student, but you don't feel able to really impact it, that worry, because you're out of state or something like that. I remember when I was in high school, going to visit my sister at a large public school, and my parents driving back, just knowing that something was wrong with her, that something was not right. They didn't feel good about the interaction, and just remember them thought, they had no idea what to do. This was a large university, 25,000 students. They didn't even know who to call or whatever, and they were going to spend the next day trying to figure that out, to see if they could, figure out what was going on with Mel. Well, one of the things that you're paying for here in a small Christian college is the opportunity to go right to the source of someone who can help you right now. And I'm going to give you those numbers here in a minute. But during the orientation process, you will get all that information of who to call, that kind of thing. And I just really would commend to you that use that situation, that when you need someone to call, please do. Now, I take what I call guerrilla calls all the time, and those are parents that start the call with, if Johnny knew I was calling, he would kill me, but I'm worried about something, and you can't tell him. All right, great. I don't need to tell Johnny you called. If it's just I need to check up on him and see how things are going, I haven't heard from him, or what I'm hearing is concerning, And usually within the same day, I can have a report back to you that what's going on there, and then some strategy on where to move from there. So really kind of keep that in your pocket as something that you can do at CC. We want you to call. We want to be partners in this journey. We're not in place of the parents at all, and we are glad to really help you move through this experience in any way I can. So be an advocate for the experience there. You know, sometimes during this time, students want to make major decisions. It's kind of interesting. I found when things that are really up in the air with a lot of students, they're really kind of struggling because they can't control things right now in their environment because there's just too much new, and they're trying to figure it all out, that they tend to try to make a big decision. So it's nothing for a student to tell you, you know, I don't think I'm going to be an ed major anymore, and I might transfer next semester. You're like, what? Where is this coming from? And sometimes it's just so much is in the air that they are up in the air. They're trying to find something they can make a decision about and own. And sometimes a big decision like that is something they say, well, I can make that decision and make that happen. But for many of them, they are just doing that because they're unsettled, and they just need a little bit of time to work that out and let the Lord leaven that a little bit. So again, a perspective there is not to react quickly to a decision that your student might make and saying, well, what do you mean? You've always wanted to be a teacher ever since you were 5, and what are you going to do? And but to really kind of empathize there with the situation they're in, that there's so much up in the air that they're just trying to maybe make a decision that will make them feel like I've got some power here. Yeah, there's an I'm buried syndrome that happens about 8 weeks into it as midterms hit. I'm buried. I've got, you know, I can't dig myself out. I've got lots of things going. And as long as that's real positive in terms of I'm just busy, but, you know, kind of got things, you know, in the right direction, then it's a great learning time for them. And once freshmen especially go through that once they go through the fall semester, freshmen get it. I mean, they come into spring and they are just old timers already. Because once you go get 15 weeks behind you in a semester, you kind of know the routine, you know the drill, you know how things happen. You can really handle it emotionally a lot better. It's just getting them through that first semester. Lots of resources for your student if they're just buried and don't know what to do. That's why we've got the Life Direction Center for the academics, that one advisor that follows them through the 4 years here. They've obviously living with an RA upperclassman who has lots of resources at their fingertips, a master's level resident director living in the residence halls, obviously the professors who I really commend to them. We have a full counseling center and health center. So lots of resources that your student needs to get in touch with. And so as you hear that, don't be real concerned at first, because it's just very normal for them to be really buried by October. But after that, very quickly, after midterms are over, you ought to see them by Thanksgiving just really coming out of that and doing well here on campus. And most of that's academic pressure, obviously. I want to talk about the first vacation visit in rules of the house real quick. And again, this is the importance of communication. I remember going back for my first weekend for college. All my guy friends were in town, and so I threw my stuff in my room and kind of said, see you, Mom, and was away most of the weekend until Sunday, and Mom wasn't very happy about that at all. She had a whole itinerary planned for me that weekend. Wasn't very happy with what I had done. But there's especially for guys, sometimes there's a really kind of a high bye syndrome of hi, I'm here and everybody's in town, and bye, I'll see you later. And you're thinking, hold on, you were going to come and we were going to sit and have coffee all weekend and talk about things. Well, what Mom and I finally got to, we just had a conversation about it, was that Friday night they wanted to see me for dinner, and that Sunday they wanted to go to church and have lunch. And so those were the two bookends. And Saturday was kind of mine to do what I wanted to do with. Sometimes it was with them, sometimes not. But the two bookends were there, that we could sit down for dinner Friday night and we could have lunch and go to church Sunday morning. and that made mom happy. So just communicate, about the weekend, what's going on this weekend. Don't assume that you've got the itinerary and your son or daughter is just going to come home and be at your disposal. And also remember that a lot of what they need to do is just chill out and sleep and take some naps and that kind of thing sometimes. Where you're raring to go, they're coming off a stint where they really need, just some time away and in a familiar place that they can just let everything down and be themselves. And then what are your rules for their visits? Now, our thing here is that, honoring your father and mother per scripture is something that you do until you're 60. And so for many of you with siblings at home, the rules of the house will remain the same even after they've come to college. But I would really ask you to have that conversation with them. Many times I'll hear from a student, ask them how their weekend was at home, and they'll say, it was a struggle. They're really treating me still like I was in high school, that kind of thing. And if I'm not saying at all change your rules, I'm just saying talk about what those rules are. Is the 9:30 curfew still in place? Is there something else now because they've been in college? Remember that what has been is they've been in a place where no one is really telling them what the rules are. We've got obviously some boundaries on quiet hours and that kind of thing. But if the guys are going to 7-Eleven at 11:30 for a Slurpee run one night, they're going. And if they're, not going to bed till 1 o'clock and that seems to be working for them okay, that's what's happening. So just have that communication. I wish my mom and dad and I had that communication before I got in and had a really bad weekend that weekend with everybody's feelings hurt, because I easily would have said that sounds fine. Friday night and Sunday, it sounds great. I'll have Saturday to do what I want. So just remember that what's the respect that you continue to count on when they're at home, but realize the freedom that they have here. And just have a conversation about what's going on. Grades and majors at first. One of the things about grades and majors are just expectations. I was kind of a C student in high school because my dad told me just to stay eligible for football and that's all I needed to do. And that's about what I did. And when I went off to college, his expectations changed, but we never had a conversation about it. So when I brought home 4 C's and a B after my first quarter in college, which I thought was pretty outstanding, Dad said, if this continues, I'm going to take away your car. And I was like, hold on, when have we ever had a grade expectation at all? And so we sat down, had a grade expectation at that point that I would do now for my 2.5, I would do better every semester of college than the previous semester. And that's what I got on and ended up graduating with a 3.5. But I never had that expectation before put on me. And obviously his expectations changed, but we didn't talk about it. So what is that grade expectation? And for some of you, it's for folks like me trying to lift them up. My mom and dad always said, we're just waiting for it to click, hope it clicked in college, and it did finally. And for others of you, it's the other way. Now, my sister was the other way. She was valedictorian of her high school and tied with another young woman for valedictorian back when they did not do co-valedictorians. And so they had to go back all the way to 6th grade before they found an A- and the other students passed. My sister had never had anything but A's for her whole life. And she didn't get involved in anything in college. She walked across the street her first day of orientation, got an internship at the hospital because that's what she knew she wanted to do. And she couldn't tell you the name of one person in college that she ever knew. So it's kind of both ends of the spectrum. So what's the expectation? And the worst advice I've ever heard parents give sometimes is, don't get too involved with things, this first semester, Jim, just hit the books. Well, I know a lot of 4.0 students who are not happy because they don't know anybody, they don't feel connected. Sitting in your apartment all the time and studying is not a great way to go either. So to really try to talk about grades and what's going on there, and especially majors, does it matter that they've talked about being an ed major for 15 years, but they changed their major when they got here in the first semester? You know, we have that class, that freshman year experience class, that's really talking a lot about gifts and talents and where the Lord's directing you, calling. And many times a student has never even gotten into that and will change their major in their fall semester. And most of the time it's in the same genre of major. So instead of biology, they're going to be pre-med, or they're going to go sports exercise science or something like that. So have a perspective on that as well. The likelihood of a major change is high. The national average is still 7 major changes for a student. I see a couple usually, but they're usually within the same genre. I was a communication major and now kind of psychology, that kind of thing. And that's just going to happen. And if they're undeclared, really that freshman year experience course really tries to help them put those gifts and talents, those strengths that we talk about all semester, kind of into play and help them really look at a major from there. So we're doing a lot on that front. And so the likelihood of a major change is pretty medium, if not a little high for some of these folks. About a third of the class comes in undeclared. So, and many schools recently have just stopped having freshmen declare majors at all until their sophomore year, just to take that pressure off. So grades and majors, what's the grade expectation? How are they doing early versus about 8 weeks, especially midterms? How did those go? And to really know that there's a likelihood of a major change along the way as well, or not. My hope is that if you have several children, one will just know what they wanted to do since they were 5 and are still doing that now, and others didn't know what they wanted to do and got to college and the Lord opened the door finally. I've never graduated an undeclared student, so the Lord does at some point get them moving in a direction that He wants them to impact His kingdom on, and that should be your prayer there. The last couple of things before I'll take some questions. There are, again, perspective on the discipline process, kind of personal issues, that kind of thing. I had a parent call me once and say that their student had just got written up the night before because they were in, it was a noise violation, and they were very concerned about it. And I said, well, tell me the story. Well, he was in a room with a bunch of guys. They forgot that it was past 10:30 and they were noisy, and the RA came by and wrote them all up for a noise violation. And I said, well, number one, it's a one-step violation. It's not even a warning situation at this point. Number two, they were with a bunch of guys. So they were connecting, and you can already tell that they're gelling with a bunch of guys, which is great. And number three, over 90% of our students in the discipline process stop as they enter. That's it. So the chances are 9 out of 10, he won't be in trouble again, because they figure it out that, okay, we've got to be a little more responsible to notice what time it is, and they're serious about this noise issue kind of thing on campus. So a perspective on the discipline, if a student tells you they got written up for something, is key. And I would really encourage you to go online to the website, look at our standards of conduct, look at our prohibited conduct, look at the STEP system. It's a very redemptive system at every point, calling the student back into a relationship with the university that's corrected and on track. Lots of resources if we need them, like counseling and alcohol education, and mentoring throughout that. So I really encourage you to kind of look at that process going forward. Very few of our students will be in the discipline process a year. And that's what's such a blessing for those of us who work in student life. We don't have to discipline these students much around here at all. So take a look at that. If there's a strange behavior, if you're like my parents that weekend of seeing Mel and just not, hearing what you want to hear from your student, and concerned about what's going on, and just kind of wondering what to do, call me or the Dean of Students. And you can find my information and Sharon Felker's information, our Dean of Students, on the website. Usually I give you a card you put on your refrigerator, but you've got all the information you need through your WOW materials and on the website. And in a minute, I'm going to give you my cell phone so that you have that, and just call me anytime, and I can get things rolling. When you're just have some strange behavior that you're not quite sure, sounds like your student, don't sit and suffer about that. Really come to us and let us help you. We want to journey with you to make this experience the best one that can happen for your student. And we want to implore God to be with us on that journey all the time. But we want to be servants. We kind of have a saying around here, what do families, what does parents expect from a small Christian college? And that's our standard. You expect to have someone you can call when you have an issue that will, within a few hours of that call, get things in motion for your students. Well, that's a few things I wanted to talk about tonight. Just as perspective, connection, communication, key words right now for you and your students. And obviously, I just pray, I mean, this is, I hope, a mile marker in your relationship with your son or daughter. It sure was for me. These 4 years or 2 years, if you have a transfer, or 3, I just pray will be a mile marker in your relationship. Where, you know, about his junior year, my Jake sat at dinner one night and just kind of said, guys, you know, one thing I've never really considered was this whole concept of light and darkness. And Jake started talking for half an hour about light and darkness. His theology professor had started to talk about the light and the darkness and how the light overcomes darkness and all that. And really, Lori and I just looked at each other dumb. I'm like, who is this kid? It was such a mile marker in our life with him, to see him thinking that deeply. In fact, we dropped an email to the professor just thanking him for doing that. And for Jake, it really started a process of thinking deeply about his faith and some things that he hadn't really thought about before. I hope that you have many conversations like that with your son or daughter going forward, that you look back and say, those college years is where we grew closer as a family and really started seeing them bloom as an adult. I started having those adult conversations that were more in-depth and kind of God-centered and God-ordained. A couple of books that I would give you if you're looking to read something during this time, and remember, Mom and Dad, you were going through a transition as well here. So remember, the Lord's working on you individually and your relationship along with your relationship with your son or daughter. One is called Give Them Wings by Carol Kuykendall, and it's a focus on the family publishing. Give Them Wings is what that's called. The other one by David Veerman from Tyndale Press is called Parenting Passages, a good book that will be encouraging to you. And if you know Stormy O'Martin from Harvest House, The Power of a Praying Parent, really a good guide for prayer during this time as well. So a few texts that will help you along the way here as you start to think about in a couple weeks, bringing your students to us, your precious gifts, so that we can begin a stewardship and a journey with them from here. So I have a few minutes here. I'd love to take some questions if you have some. So please use the chat feature or the question and answer feature on your Zoom there. And I will try to answer any questions that you might have about this topic or others. If you are wondering about the WOW schedule, go online to look at the WOW schedule. It's abbreviated this year, obviously, with things that are going on. But we do have some things happening on the 19th there as you come to drop off your students here at CCU. You can ask questions through that website as well. If you haven't gotten onto the parent page, there you should have gotten some information on how to get on the parent Facebook page. so that you can see other parents' questions and ask some yourselves as well. Yes, thank you. Here's my cell phone number, and call it any day or night. It is 303-596-2406. Now my office number is 303-963-3363. But feel free to give that cell phone a call anytime that you have a concern or a question that you just can't get answered. I'm glad to do that anytime. Other questions? Anything I can answer? This is a very satisfied crowd, it looks like. I'll wait another second here before I sign off if there is another question I can answer. Okay. Well, here's one that popped up maybe. Yes, we are thinking about Call to Community, kind of our big premier event for orientation. We want to have that because it's a great transition time as you hand your student off to us. We've got some ideas and we're working on them, and so by the end of the week we hope to have kind of a firm commitment on Call to Community and how it's happening or not. It will happen in some way. So for Thursday evening, for the 19th, Wednesday evening. So we feel confident it's going to happen some way. We're hoping that it's in seat together, and we're working with our local school district who's had some graduations here. We have a big stadium right behind us here that's the local school districts, and they've been having graduations there. And we've asked public health if we adhere to the same guidelines as the graduation, maybe could we have it there? And they've said yes. So we're trying to figure that out and hopefully can pull that together so we can all be together in one place to really ask the Lord to bless the class and to move it forward for the semester. So more to come on that. Should be by the end of the week. All right. Well, great to be with you tonight, and I look forward to seeing many of you next week as you bring your kids here to CCU. And I just ask the Lord to bless this time for you guys as a family, to bless your finances, to bless your plans, and to bless this 2 weeks that can be kind of stressful as you're trying to get all the logistics together to get them here. But that you have a time of just deep relationship with your son or daughter, and that this fall is just a blessing for your family as they come to CCU and start their journey. Really, this is the time that the Lord is starting to really unpack some things in their life and open up some things in their life. It's an exciting time. So that's why many of us have been here a long time, because we love to see that journey unfold with these students. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week, and thanks for joining me tonight.